jackass talking to him saying, hey, look, you're really not going this way, are you? And he ended up seeing an angel, and the angel said, well, if it wasn't for that jackass, you'd be a dead man. He said, okay, I'll go around and turn back. And the angel said, no, you'll go, and you will prophesy what God will tell you to prophesy. So that he did, and 3 different times he prophesied, and he prophesied good to Israel. And Balak he went through himself saying, I came here for you to prophesy against him, and you prophesied for them. And Balaam said, hey, you know something? I could only do what God told me to do, what God told me to say. However, as the story goes, Balaam told Balak how to corrupt Israel, and that's by sending their women down to marry or to have sex with or whatever the men of Israel. That happened, and those men were destroyed in order to take out any of the, poison, for a better word, that was caused by these women sleeping with these men. But like I said, this was such a important thing that happened. It's referred back to the cost of being seduced by evil. There's always a cost to immorality. This phrase that came up to me, and I looked, and I knew it was from Pogo, the comic strip. And Pogo said, makes a statement, we have met the enemy, and the enemy is us. The reason being is because we've fallen into moral ambiguity. I think I used that word before, where it's no longer what I said goes, and I'm a man. You've heard these phrases, I'm a man of my word. All you have to do is shake hands on it, and it will come to pass, because what I say I'm going to do is what I'll do. And they had that type of importance on the words that the king spoke. It says in Psalms that God is not above his word, or God's words are above his name, which means God's words were so important that those words defined who he was. And that was the same calling that the kings had. And I go back to the Old Testament in Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, and Cyrus, where the king's decree is what went. And when the king decreed something, it could not be taken back. The good story to read is the book of Esther, where Ahasuerus was manipulated by Haman to write a decree that because of the evilness of the children of Israel, on a certain day, it was like a year or so from the time it was mentioned, that people could get together, the citizens of these different countries that were under Persia, might as well say Babylonia, could go out and kill the Jews. However, the issue was exposed by Esther and Malachi, and it ended up that Ahasuerus' words could not be changed. But what he did was he sent out another decree that the Jews had the right to defend themselves. So when it came time for those, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, whoever you want to call them, to take out the children of Israel, the children of Judah, that Judah wiped them out, and wiped them out completely, so much so that Malachi got Ahasuerus to say, okay, let's this happen a couple of different times in order to make sure all of of Judah's enemies are put down. Of course, there's the idea of sending people back to Jerusalem, Ezra, Nehemiah, in order to rebuild the wall, in order to build Jerusalem again. And those words that Darius spoke, again, they had weight. He couldn't contradict what he said. Unfortunately, this day and time, we don't see our words as such. Probably especially within the last 50 or 60 years, where you may shake hands with a person, but you have the hand of a lawyer in your behind your back, ready to tear apart the agreement in order for somebody to wiggle out of it. You know, the cost of immorality is the captivity and destruction of a country. Unfortunately, the consequences of principles these days puts you on the outside of what society is, and they actually laugh at people that have principles, or those people with principles could actually be destroyed because they contradict and they stand in contrast of those people that are immoral and want to continue to spread their immorality. And you can even see that within the United States. You see the principles are torn down by the seeking of the immorality of the actions of others. Ladies and gentlemen, this can't be so, and it should not be so. If you look at all the major, and I believe that this is true throughout history, is that if you look at the history of the men or of the countries that have been in the rule of the world, whether it be the Medes and the Persians, whether it be the Babylons with Nebuchadnezzar, no matter what it is, when you see a country leaves its principles and goes into morality, the country fails. Because the country is overtaken by another country that has principles and will live by those principles until yet again they fall into immorality and they got taken over. That's what happened to Israel. You had kings after David, you might as well say, because Solomon fell into idolatry. And what happened was the son after Solomon split the country into Israel, into Judah and Benjamin. And what you see is that Israel never could get back to following God because they decided to make that same stupid golden calf that they made in the desert hundreds of years before and worshipped it. However, Judah went back and forth with idolatry. You had some kings that tore down the high places, tore down the poles to Balaam, tore down the altars that they offered on their burnt offerings unto idols, and they brought people back to the Word, to God, and to worshiping God. However, after that king would depart, after that king would die, you would find that the people would be falling back into that type of behavior, to such a point where God said, okay, I have kept my covenant with you, but you've continued to break your covenant with me. So what's going to happen is, because you've broken your covenant, you're going to be going into captivity. Because the morality was so bad that it had to be taken out of Israel. And that's what happened. And this is going to get a point that I'm going to talk about the world today. It was after 70 years that Judah was brought back and rebuilt Jerusalem. two things is Manasseh, if you read 2 Kings, the end of 2 Kings, Manasseh, which was the son of Hezekiah, was evil. I mean, so evil that that's when the Lord said, okay, you're going to go into captivity. He said that to Hezekiah, and Hezekiah did a couple of things that he shouldn't have done. So when Manasseh came into power, he went off the deep end. Now, at the latter part, Manasseh tried to turn his life around, but his son Asa turned back to the Lord, and all the people had said that the Passover had never been kept like it had been until Asa. I mean, you're talking about all the judges, you're talking about all the kings, and this king is the one that brought Israel's face back to the Lord, such as it staved off for another 40 years what was going to happen to Israel. They were saved because they followed a godly king. When the next king came, who was evil, who was idolatrous, that was the time of Jeremiah, and Jeremiah prophesied, as well as Isaiah prophesied at that time, especially Jeremiah, about Israel being led into captivity, and that's what happened under Nebuchadnezzar. Finally, destroyed the walls of Jerusalem, took most of the people away, except the poorest of the poor, that he left to fend for themselves, because they were pretty much powerless. So this is my concern about the United States, is that what moral code are we going to follow in the United States? Are we going to follow the principles that we were founded on? Are we going to follow the principles that allowed all men, it says that were created equal? Or are we going to fall into the immorality that one is better than another, that murder is all right, and that anything done for the sake of another individual's quote unquote right should be not only supported but applauded? We're seeing a country that's divided, and it's not divided by necessarily political parties, though that's what people would like to think, is being divided by morality. At the core, we have to look at the core of the movements that are happening in the United States. And I'm not talking about what they call the alt-left or the alt-right, because you get to the left, you're into communism. No matter what they say, it's communism. And communism begets atheism, because you hear the word secular humanism or humanistic ideology. The global ideology would be, we could call a humanist ideology a secular humanism. Atheistic in its nature, do what's right in your own eyes, and destroy anybody that tries to say anything different. The alt-right, however, we're looking at the white supremacists, the Nazis. The people think that they're right above others, that they have the right to oppress other races, nationalities, because there's only one right one. So one, you have, when you say nationalist, I would say it's not necessarily nationalist, because white supremacists aren't necessarily nationalists. They're in it for themselves. They want to rule the world just like the other side does. what we're talking about is